All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Online Bible Institute Network podcast. I'm Douglas Laws. With me is my father, Pastor Steve Laws, founder of the Online Bible Institute Network. Dad, we missed you last week, but Brain and I had a really good talk. And, I had the blessing of getting to speak at our church last weekend about forgiveness and unforgiveness and what that does. And, thank you, Dad, for that opportunity. And, last week you weren't feeling well, but I'm glad you're feeling a little better. Although, you've had a hard week this week too. My dad, their beloved dog, Mia, went to be with Jesus yesterday. So, that's hard for you. So thank you for being a part of this. Your dog was one of your children. He'd call me up. We FaceTime almost every day, and he'd be like, "Hey, here's your sister," and, with the dog, putting her on the same plane as my human sister. So, but anyway, thank you for being here, Dad. And I'm so sorry.
It's hard comparatively. I mean, there's a lot harder things, but
sure,
it's just there's a little sadness going on. But
she was a part of the family.
Yeah, she was with us for almost 16 years. So
yeah, because she was with my son when he was born, because we would hang out at your house a lot, and she kind of helped him grow up a little bit. And
so there's all those things, but it's unfortunately it's everybody's life. I mean, it's going to happen. I have some real hopeful beliefs in new creation and which is really good for me. And not everybody would agree with me, but I think animals are a part of all that. And so for me, and you don't have to agree with me, but for me, this hope is all a big part of it. That's some really good stuff that we look forward to.
Yeah.
But we're plugging on, and we're making the best of it, and we will continue to press in, and lots of good things happen. You did a great job on the weekend. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're doing that more and more, which is good. And I was sitting there thinking sillily that part of me wishes when I had that background that I'm sitting in front of made that I had it spelt wrong and see how many people would notice it. Made it WROK instead, and just on purpose.
Okay.
But anyway,
Net rock.
Yeah, net rock. I don't know why I was thinking that, but I was thinking it.
Typos are really funny. They can be a source
be
of hilariousness.
Yeah. It's like no regrets.
Like
right?
no regrets, baby.
Yeah.
Don't get that tattooed, please.
No, I'm not. Not going to get tattoos.
Well,
anyway.
no, that's not on my radar at all.
Yeah. Not that there's a problem with that. Again,
no, they're good. They work for some folks, and then there's folks like us who want to be in bed by like 9:30 at night, and we're not those,
late.
Well, that's late for you. 9:30. I'm thinking about it. Yeah. But anyway, this week it looks like you're looking at the Lord's Prayer, and so why don't you kind of lead us through where you're going? Because a lot of us are in ministry, and we've gone through the Lord's Prayer, and it's really it's Jesus providing a template for prayer, if you will. I've heard it taught that way. So I'm kind of curious where you're going to go this week as we look into the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah. So we're hanging out in Luke now, because, we were in John, and I think John helps us to see Jesus. Luke, the way we're looking through it, really helps us to know Jesus, and particularly in like drawing closer to his heart. Like we're sort of in this series, people might not have noticed it yet, but we're looking at what we can sort of do to really tune into the heart of Jesus. And so we started in our discussion about the Word and the importance of spending time in the Word, right? When we looked at the whole temptation thing, how Jesus used the Word. Last week you were talking about forgiveness and unforgiveness, and really that's about how we're to relate to people, and how he relates to us, and that if we don't get the forgiveness part down and the mercy and grace that comes along with it, then we're never going to be, if we'll end up being judgmental and critical. We won't love the way he calls us to, and we won't understand the love that he calls us to. And so this one is about, the importance of prayer and engaging in the prayer, and that, the Lord's Prayer, when the disciples asked Jesus, teach us to pray, and I think he writes them this poem. Because that's what this is. It's a poem that Jesus wrote and gives to his disciples, which gives it a whole different meaning.
Yeah, when you
That
think, because I've never heard of it as a poem
this
before.
was
Yeah.
he wrote this poem so that his disciples, because you can remember poems.
Right.
The Bible is filled with poetry and songs because that's how we remember. It's you things happen in songs and poems that don't happen anywhere else, and they connect in different spots, right? Because you're obviously a musician, the power of music to
Yeah.
connect people beyond what words do, right? I mean, it's in the words, but there's more to it. Well, same thing with poetry and poems, and the Lord's Prayer was Jesus' own poem. I mean, he went and this was his poem, and he wrote and he gave to his disciples so they could remember. And it's never. I mean, we should memorize it. You should, and most people in the world have heard of the Lord's Prayer. It's that popular. It's been in
Right.
songs and
Right.
everything, but it's not. It was. I don't think it was ever intended just to be recited and there you go. It was a model or a guide, as you'd said earlier, for prayer. I think it's very much based off of the great commandment: love the Lord your God. Heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. The big ones. And that the way the prayer is broken, it's broken into that sort of two petitions. The first one is about loving God, and it's set apart by the your statements. Y- You know, your kingdom, your will, and
Hallowed be
your name,
your
your name,
kingdom,
your
your
kingdom,
will.
your will. So those are the your, and that's the love God all in part, and we'll break those down, into what they mean, and then it's the us statements. Give us, forgive us, lead us, and those are that's kind of really the love your neighbor as yourself stuff. Because that's both in there. Love your neighbor as yourself, and that somehow that thought is in these whole things. You give us our daily bread, forgive us as we forgive those, and lead us not into temptation but deliver us from evil. That these ideas are there in the poem, and I have this thought that what's supposed to happen, it's just my thinking as I'm looking at this now after many many years, that it is a great guide for prayer because it deepens the ideas. There's things that you should sort of be thinking about as you pray this that help to open it up. But then I have a thought at some point it helps us to live it.
Hmm.
That somehow we're supposed to be a living prayer. Like our lives become this prayer walking out. And so that doesn't mean that we shirk spending time in prayer, but like, oh, well, that's just my life now. But we really think about throughout the course of our lives how we live each day. It's our Father in heaven. All right, Dad, it's all about you. Let your name be hallowed, and the hallowing of His name is really about bearing His name well. It's all back to the third commandment, which isn't don't say a cuss about
Right.
God's name. It's about being what does it mean to be in the family of God? What are you honoring the name that you have as the family of God in the way that you live, or are you not? And that's a pretty deep thing, right? And then your kingdom come, living in the tension of the now and the not yet, dealing, at times like with the hard stuff in life, and yet knowing that God is good, that God is faithful, that we can trust Him, that He's a sovereign. He's in, that we sort of hang in that area in this life throughout our days beyond just what we say. Let God, it's your will we want done. And this is one of those places where when you talk with people, you always kind of have to be a little cautious, because, why do we pray for God's will to be done? A lot of people think God's will is always done. And I just think, well, it's not. We live in a fallen world on a broken planet. This is, it's not how God wanted it at all.
Right, right.
We're living in a consequence of our own making, not the one He created for us. And so that's a hard dynamic for people that often want to say, well, it was God's will. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Sometimes things happen. I think, well, that's not God's will at all. It's very hard to paint that as God's will. I don't think it was. It was evil. It was clearly the enemy at work. Now, God can use it.
Well, God will always have his way in the end, but I think where people get confused is like, the way we look at our lives, it changes when we think about how, we have to ask for God's will to happen in our lives, right? Because, there's all these things at play, and it's really hard for us to make sense of it all. And, if we look at our life, like, why did this happen to me?
Right.
And we hear, well, that, God's will kind of used as a way for people to like try to get us to suppress our emotions. So I think a lot of it comes from that, but it's, we've heard talked about, and I think we've mentioned it on the podcast before. God's goodness is simple, right? But it's his sovereignty that's complex. And that, I think, is that issue that we've talked about in the past. It's hard for people to really grasp because,
and that's all in play here with this.
Yeah.
Why are we praying that? Because we need to pray that. When people think, because if you don't get this, then you won't pray. What difference does it make? If God's will always happens, why am I praying? And it's not. And part of it is also that there's this thing that I think happens, where it becomes more of how we live than just how we pray. That it actually begins to the tension in the now and the not yet begins to change a little with us as we really begin to live it out, and we struggle with His goodness. Which is, if it's not good, without making it over simple, if it's not good, it's not God.
Yeah.
And yet how we define that. But He's sovereign and He's able to work things together. But there was so much that happened because He gave us choices that we don't always, we want the choices, but we don't want the consequences of the choice. I think that's what it comes down to, right? Oh, I want to do what I want, but I don't want consequence. Anyway, we have all that going on. So this begins to impact us. And then there's that second sort of, those second yes statements are a shift then about what that means for us. It's about Him, love God all in, and then love your neighbor as yourself. What does this look like? And it looks like asking for daily bread, give us our provision, but ultimately it's a trust thing, and it's a knowing that He's good and that He's got it, and sort of hanging out in that whole dynamic of what does that mean to trust God every day. And for us, many of us in our country, we're sort of very used to sort of having provision for more than today. Not that we have the promise of, guarantee of a breath more than today, but, we have, we're not sort of going after stuff. And if things are so different, that's why I love having Brain on there when he can come. I was talking to him yesterday. What are you doing? And they were having to go look for water. So what do you mean? And he goes, well, it's dry time of year. We have to go and hunt for water. And we put buckets in and go and I'm like, yeah, okay. We were without water here for about a week one time after the hurricane. And it's not like I didn't have water. I had bottles of water, but we didn't have running water, and we were having to figure out showers and facilities and stuff. But that's not our life, right?
No, it's not normal.
Yeah. But so, I have to be in mind when I talk, because we have students all over the world. Their circumstances are so much different than mine that they don't have the luxury of maybe grieving a pet. You know what I mean? It's like, so I understand that. It doesn't mean that it's less for me, the grief. It just means that it's different, and I want to respect that difference. So, we have to learn to ask for and trust in daily provision, just like back in the wilderness with the manna and everything. Get enough for the day. Don't be grabbing all that other stuff. I think next week I'm gonna tackle generosity a little bit, and it kind of comes up in the flow of things. It's interesting, and because that's at the heart of it. I think we often will go after that in the idea of it's about giving, and it's about being generous, and there's a difference, and that there's a place of freedom and life, I think, that comes from that. But part of that is in the whole trusting in God for daily stuff, shifting from the ownership mindset to the stewardship mindset. Everything I have is God's. Culturally, though, I'm very used to I'm the owner of that.
Right.
But then the reality is I'm the steward of that because God owns it. Because He owns everything. And there's something there's a freedom that comes from that mindset that I would love to see more people get a hold of, instead of thinking that it's just about the money, because it's not. So, but anyway, it's to give us today our daily bread, and in that there's also some of the tension of, I think included in that prayer. I don't think I'll have time to get to that this weekend. Is the tension of give us today the bread of tomorrow. And that there's probably a connection with, you ever heard of like the bread that they, it's like a sourdough recipe. I think that there's a piece that they keep and they hang on to it for the next day's bread, and then they make bread out of it. It's a starter piece for bread that continues. Like there's like yeast in it and stuff, and you can keep. And there's something about the bread of tomorrow that you could hang on to, and that we're praying for the bread of tomorrow to break into today all the time, that there's a tension involved in that. Anyway, that's another discussion.
I don't get to bake a whole lot of bread.
Yeah, I know. That's okay.
I live low carb. I love bread, but I can't eat it so much. But because I don't get the experience of baking it. But it's cool when I hear things like that. If that's something that actually happens, and that's kind of what we ask for. Is like, okay, Lord, help us have what we need tomorrow as well too. That's
so we're in effect praying for the bread of tomorrow today.
Right.
That's in this prayer. It's probably a big part of that prayer that we can't always get to, but. So there's that, and then the forgiveness piece that you got. We did the whole thing last week because it's such a priority that I wanted to make sure it had its own time to be addressed. It's huge, right? And the Christian life, because He says, forgive others so that you can be forgiven. I mean, somehow the forgiveness that we receive is tied up in it, and so we have to be aware of it. And then the lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil piece. It's really about this prayer, this poem that Jesus gives the disciples, is to help them engage in the cosmic battle that we're all in. And when you start doing those other things I talked about, you're going to end up in some battle. I mean, it's all part of it, because you get pushback. The enemy's famous for it.
Yeah.
And so all of these ideas are kind of in the Lord's Prayer, moving from just something that's recited to something that's practiced,
right.
And then that's something that actually impacts life, so that you're living it. And again, I want to be careful. Well, I'm living that prayer now. I don't have to pray. That's not it. But your life should begin to reflect this element of prayer, I think, significantly.
Man, that's good. Yeah, not just recite it, but live it. That's the word. And that's a good word.
Prayer.
Yeah.
Make us a prayer, God.
Looking forward to hearing it this weekend. It's going to be a good talk, as a lot, if not all, are. But again, thank you so much. I love these times with you, just getting to go over the messages. It's very helpful, and hopefully it's helpful for everybody listening. That was the goal of this podcast, was to just cover our sermon coaching sessions. And, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you're involved with ministry at some point. And, we all are involved with ministry at some point, and it's just helpful to know how to kind of process through and do that. So thank you for that.
And the people that are watching it, we're going to start adding some new guests, and
Yeah, yeah,
the overall tenor of the Bible Institute Network. We're actually beginning to really put some more. It's not that it hasn't been important; it has for years, but there's more of an emphasis coming at it now, and so you'll begin to see some things that have been sort of in the background for the last couple of years that are going to start happening, and I think it's going to take it in a whole nother direction in a very amazing sort of thing we're just on the beginning of some things that are going to be, I think we'll look back 10 years from now, God willing, and we'll go, wow, do you remember?
yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
Man, good stuff. Looking forward to it all. And, it all starts with folks like y'all listening and just being a part and doing your courses and providing feedback and praying for us. So thank you for that. I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Online Bible Institute Network podcast. Hopefully next week we'll have Pastor Brain back with us. We missed him. He provides valuable insight, and we'll have
he's
the gang
the brains
all
of the
back
outfit.
together. He's the brains, man. Yeah, I just push buttons. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you all for being here. We will see you next time.